right, I think we're up. Dr. Mark, thanks for being here. You're back for, I guess, the second time returning on the Shelor Select podcast here. And I appreciate you being here. You doing okay?
I am. And Chris, I want to just say thank you so much for having me back as a guest.
So for those who didn't hear the first episode, but it was all about Age-Decoded, I think was the name of the book, right? Sci-fi book. It was all about CRISPR technology. Just to give people a little bit of a quick rerun here.
Yes.
And for CRISPR technology, basically that it's all about exploiting genes through computers, so to speak.
Yeah, through DNA manipulation, genetic engineering. So in my book, I'm trying to look about a couple hundred years into the future and explore what it might be to be human anymore, when in fact they can change human nature in many good ways, like, for example, fighting disease, but then there might be some other things that go on. So what it means to be a human will be fundamentally altered as we learn more and more and implement genetic engineering. Yeah,
I was keeping up with it a whole lot, and there in the beginning, like when we first started talking about it, I think we were on here about a year ago or so, and it seems like, who was the Harvard professor we talked about? Was it David Sinclair? Is that something?
David Sinclair, that's right.
Yeah, and he's been on a couple of different podcasts I listened to, and he was really promoting it hardcore. And I haven't seen much of it lately, but that's what really struck my interest in it, was just what he was talking about, kind of reversing aging, as you just said, and almost giving people, what is it, immortality, right?
Yeah. So there's stopping aging, which there's a lot of research on that too, and then there's even going further, trying to reverse human aging.
Yeah, and one thing that kind of, I guess this might be a little bit of a side tangent, but I've been keeping up now with, I think it's called cryonics. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. And so for those who don't know what cryonics is, but it's basically, if you were to get a disease that was not curable right now, that they could freeze your body at a certain time, right, in hopes to find a cure and bring you back at a certain time. So.
Indeed. Now, in my book, I don't really have that technology. I have something anti-cloning totipotency, which involves sort of regrowing organ by organ, but I don't have the freezing and bringing back. However, that's still possible too, that sort of thing, and that would be still through the genetic material that would be brought back, I'm pretty sure. But it's pretty wild to think about what's going to happen in 100 or 200 years. And actually, some of this is even happening now. For example, one good thing is they've used genetic engineering to fight some rare diseases, where they sort of inject the genetic manipulation code into your bloodstream, and then it finds the organ. And for example, in the case of a liver disease, amyloidosis, they've already it's a rare disease, but they've already had these injections target just the liver cells, which is pretty cool, and then change the genetic coding of that tissue in that area only, which is pretty important.
Yeah.
And very isolated, very, very specific now. That's a breakthrough, actually. And they just did that this year. I believe it was at university, at Imperial College, but I'm not sure, somewhere in the UK. But anyway, so they successfully actually stopped that disease in 4 human beings who had that rare disease. So that's really interesting. So because one of the complaints with genetic engineering, you're going to affect all the genetic code, and then it'll be passed forward, and there'll be side effects and all that. But if you can really zero in like that, it could be pretty positive in many ways. Yeah.
Well, I think that was kind of what we talked about even last time, was the side effects of using CRISPR technology and changing your own genetic DNA coding, and what are possible ones that can happen. And I know we don't need to go down deep dive on this, because I want to talk about what brought you back here today.
Sure.
But that is pretty, it's, like you just said, it's interesting in that in today's times that we're starting to see these breakthroughs, and that, I don't know if you said 100 or 200 years in our lifetime or what, but if we're going to be able to see fixes for these incurable diseases, which, then I guess here comes the question, that does people really want to live forever? Or
Yeah,
are we really meant to live forever?
Yeah, that's a big question because there's so many even psychological impacts of the idea of, oh, I'm immortal now. Okay, hold on just a sec. I'm immortal. So, okay, what do I ever retire from working? Do we have children anymore? Because if everybody's immortal, you can't keep populating the earth if very few people are dying. So do we have generations and fathers and daughters and grandmothers and all that? So all this comes up in my book, and it's intriguing. The humans are meant to, well, so far are meant to die and pass on through natural selection and all that, our genes. And that would all be obliterated if we all were immortal. It would be a completely different landscape, human landscape. And even what it means to be human would be different. I think we would approach being robots just as robots are approaching being humans. There might be even like this big grand meeting between the two where you can't even distinguish.
Well, it's one of those seems like the actual sci-fi movies that we always basically see, rather be like the humans versus the machines, right?
Yeah,
whatever come happens. But
yeah.
But I heard somebody once say that they went and saw their favorite movie, and it was like a 3-hour movie, one of the Marvel movies or something like that, and they made it and talking about immortality, that it was one of those things that he felt like all things needed to come to an end because it's a 3-hour movie and he doesn't want to sit there and watch that movie forever. And this is the way he put it. I was like, well, that kind of makes sense to me. But, watching a movie and life are obviously two different things. But
yeah. So in Age-Decoded in my book, I bring that forth too. There's a concept, I just made it up, called immortality ennui, where ennui, that's not direction, listlessness, what am I doing, feeling or outlook is thrust upon people because they're suddenly immortal. And after a few more decades or 50 to 100 years, people start becoming hampered by this condition of immortality ennui. And some of them do anyway. And so that's just one thing. So suicide becomes a sort of a viable option for some of these people.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go down a COVID soapbox or anything, but it seems like didn't suicide rates and stuff like that increase during COVID times? I mean, I guess we're out of a pandemic now, but I mean, I think it was one of those things that people, for instance, I'm a single guy. I mean, living by yourself, and then when I had it pretty well. I mean, I can't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but I was still able to go to the gym. I was still able to go to the grocery store. I just had the only thing that really changed for me was put on a mask, right?
Yes.
But but obviously that you start to realize when you're living off momentum, you're going day in and day out, go to work, routine, whatever, go to the gym, come home, that when all that comes to a halt, it's like, ooh, wait. And psychologically, it takes an impact on your mental health. And, like I said, I was, pretty lucky and very fortunate that, life didn't change much for me. But those, who were maybe stuck in a high rise in New York on top of each other, who were not allowed to go out. I mean, it's, I feel for them. I empathize with them.
Yeah, it's the effect on the human psyche, pretty much. Yeah.
But what brings you back, though, is you got another book, right?
Right, I do. I'm really excited about this one. It's different. First of all, it's not a fiction. It's not science fiction. It's somewhat autobiographical. It's about my daughter and I. So let's say biography and autobiography. It's about my daughter, Steffi, and I. My daughter is now 25 years old, just to make sure that's clear. But the book starts when she's 7 years old. And she says to me and my wife, Lynn, she says, I want to go run around the block. And I'm like, what? Why would you want to go run around? And I want you to time me too. Okay. So she seemed to have this innate desire to run and to run competitively. First by competing against herself. She was only 7 and we're living in the big city of Toronto. So I sort of thought I better put some shoes on and go with her, make sure she doesn't get run over by a car or attacked by a dog or something, who knows.
Sure.
Right? So she's only 7. So I've been very sedentary at this point in my life. I'm 45 years old. So I get off the couch, find some shoes and go with her on that first jog. And that first jog changed everything. Like for me, so the book is called Run Daughter, Run Father. And I put daughter in front of father there because she was the runner. I joined her and then I became competitive athlete too. And we both, over the next 17 years, really pursued our dreams somewhat together, not totally together, but we shared this pursuit, this athletic endeavor. And it was a wonderful sharing. It was a bonding with my daughter it's just so positive, and I wanted to share the stories. We had our ups and downs,
Sure.
for sure, but I want to share the stories, and that's why I wrote the book. And the book actually has a lot of good, not just stories, but training advice and scientific research on running and whatnot. And so it's sort of a mixture of stories, personal stories about Stephanie and I, and then the research and on fitness and training, especially for distance running. So.
Yeah, one thing when you contacted me wanting to come back on and talking about the book again, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I recently just completed my first half marathon. So
congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah. So I was when this was like kind of like, I don't know what you want to say. It's just like universal came for full circle. And I was like, I'd love to get this right here. And
good.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So can I ask, where was the race?
Yeah, so it was local, and just so you remember, I'm in the southwestern part of Virginia, like right outside of Blacksburg, Virginia.
Right.
And it was a 3-person triathlon competition. So one of our gym members did the bike. And then this one wasn't a swimming, it was a kayak. So I think they had a kayak 12 miles. And then I did the half marathon at the end of it. And
that's great.
And it was like right along the New River Trail. If you've ever heard of that, it kind of same thing as the Appalachian Trail, so to speak, but a little bit different. But it was, I trained for 2-ish months, 3 or 3 months.
Is that your first time trying that distance? It's a pretty good distance.
So, my background, I'm a CrossFitter. So 5K was probably about the longest I've ever done. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. That was pretty typical in a regular CrossFit workout for me. And then, these 2 members came to the gym, and it was something, I guess it was the state parks were wanting to put this on, and they asked if I wanted to, be part of it. And for me here lately, I've always been trying to look for things that really challenge me and will make things hard for me. And that way, I learn about myself and learn if I can do it, and learn if I haven't done it. I just, I feel better doing things like when I overcome these obstacles now. Right.
Yeah.
It was a perfect opportunity.
Yeah. So, good for you. And how did you feel the next day? Were you a little stiff or not?
Actually, the worst part, and we could talk about this too, and I don't know what normal training programs are like and what they do for half marathons or what you might do for yours, but it was typically 1 week would be you run 4 days out of the week, and let's just say you would run like 4 miles, 5 miles. Then I think it was maybe another 5, and let's say 6 on the Saturday. Right.
Okay.
And then, in a way, it was like a 12-week program. In a way, the program was written that each time you go out and run, you're supposed to try to at least do a little bit better than the last time. Right. Pick up your pace a little bit or whatever. But I was still doing my CrossFit training on this, at the same time too. So I was putting a lot on my body at the same time. But the worst part, to answer your question, once my ankles was like the worst part of me trying to build up. And I've always had maybe weaker ankles. And, I went out and bought some special shoes to run in and all that good stuff. And at the end of the race, my ankles hurt so bad. Like, I could walk, but it was just like literally me kind of like, holding against a wall.
Yeah.
And that was the worst part. The next day and the next morning, I woke up, I felt fine. I went, took my dogs for a walk just to get a little active recovery.
Good. Fantastic.
That was one question I wanted to ask, the ankle. So that seemed to be the worst thing.
Yeah. I wonder, so it was like the inside of the ankles or the medial side or the lateral side?
Yeah, the inside.
The inside, eh? So I would have to take a look at your shoes and your feet. Maybe you had somebody look at it. I mean, it could be anything from the shoes are too tight, but I'm sort of doubting it's that, to you need orthotics because your feet are rotating too much or something like that. I don't know if you have orthotics.
No, I went to a special running store and they watched me run. There was a guy watched me run, and he said I kind of had an inside gait.
Yeah, so you might be pronating on inside. That's going to put pressure on your medial ligaments there, and then as you increase the distance, you're going to start feeling it. But with orthotics or something, you could probably get that corrected pretty quickly. And maybe if the shoes are too tight in combination with all that, it's just worse. So it's probably something that you can fix. What's the longest distance you did before the half?
I did do right at 13 miles the week before.
Oh, did you? Okay. So did you feel it during that?
Yeah, it wasn't as bad. I did feel it. They were like, "Oh, this hurts," but it's it wasn't like pain where I was like, "I need to go see somebody" or anything. It was just it's kind of sucked.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, there's always, and that's like in my book, it's interesting. There's always these challenges your faces from. I have a large discussion about injuries and health in Run Daughter, Run Father. That's really, really important. That's really the pivotal issue for most runners, and that's what's going to make them. That's what's going to sideline them, frustrate them, and make them try to come back even harder. Is the injury bug. It's the runner's curse actually is injury, because I did a little calculation in the book. If you do a decent amount of running, like a half marathoner might do 200K a month, or let's say 130 miles a month, 30 or 40 miles a week, like a pretty serious half marathon.
Sure.
I don't. You did close to that. It sounds like you're doing about 25 a week. Anyway, so you're doing 60,000 steps per foot per month. 60,000. So if there's anything a little bit off biomechanically, it's going to show up in that. It's going to start affecting you. But most of it can be solved. So that's the good news too. So.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of figured out was that, I knew a couple of people who did run. They were distance runners, and I was asking them for tips and advice and what they were doing, and maybe if they could, share some tips with me. And that, because literally the first week when I started running, I was telling them that it felt like my Achilles was going to pop out.
Yeah,
yeah, and I thought I was in trouble because that was, the first. I think I was doing 3. It was like 3, 4, 5 miles that week. Nothing major.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm in trouble if I'm already.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, you got through that. So did you just stretch a lot?
Yeah, it was just one of those that I would just start going on YouTube and looking up what other people were doing, like just stretching before my workout, stretching a little bit after. And I bought toe spacers, which I don't know if that does anything or not, but I thought that why not? There was some science behind that I've been reading. Do you know what toe spacers?
No, what are they? Sorry, I thought you said Toastmasters. I'm thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Toastmasters. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So did that? So that helped out with the forefoot, and then translated a little bit.
It did. I think it maybe helped with circulation, but I've never had. There's some science behind it with plantar fasciitis. Like say if the big toe is kind of starting to get crooked, but I've never had feet like that, and knock on wood. So, but I felt like my feet were getting a little bit better circulation, and I would only wear them like walking around the house, maybe do some stretching around the house and watching TV and stuff. Yeah,
that's good. Well, that's great. You got all the elements going early there, and that you're a real runner when all that starts happening. So, but the CrossFit is fantastic because that takes some of the pressure off with some of that. But that's sorry, yeah.
No, yeah, you're fine. I was just wanting. It was just. It was one of the best things I've ever done, but also one of the hardest things I think I've done here recently. Was just that, one thing that for me, it takes a lot of time just to run, even 6 miles, you at least plan an hour out of your day.
Sure. Yeah.
And that, I had to start planning between around my job and around CrossFit training and everything. So like, I want to spend an extra day or an extra hour or even a little bit more, an extra 15 minutes just to get to where I was running at and stretching afterwards and stuff. And it was that was another one of the biggest challenges was just the time management of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sort of lucky because I am now retired from teaching. I've been retired for 3 years. Just before COVID hit, I retired. So I got sort of lucky that way too.
Right.
And so I have, I think you mentioned I'm doing triathlons now. So yep. I try to do a couple of workouts a day, but I've got time for that, right? So sometimes I'll do a swim, say in the morning before noon, and then depending if it's really hot, do the run at night or maybe just before dinner, or a bike ride. I usually don't bike and run on the same day because they're using my legs, both of them. But swim, I like to combine with the other two.
So typically, what does a training session look like for you during a day? I mean, it's a couple hours each day, or do you just kind of space it out a week, or what?
Yeah, so I'll try to do 10 or 11 workouts per week. Okay. I might even take a full day off with that. Like if I'm feeling a little tired or whatever, or just got something, I'm too busy, I just won't do anything. But so the other 6 days, I'm doing pretty much 2 workouts. So that's almost 12 workouts, 12 if I do 2. And like I say, I like to combine swimming with running or biking.
Yeah.
Because, or sometimes I'll do a bike followed by a run, because in the triathlon event itself, you do a bike followed by a run, and the run, it does not feel good when you're coming off the bike. So you have to actually practice that feeling. It's called a brick workout. So you get off the bike, you might have been an hour or 2 hours on a bike, and then you got to go run. And the first kilometer is just awful. Your legs feel like just, bleh. And but they sort of find themselves. They actually do find themselves after a while, and then, but you're never as good as just running, you know. So that's called a brick work. I like to do some of those, but generally when I do double workouts, I like to swim with a run or swim with a bike. And so it might be an hour swimming or a kilometer or two swimming. Usually in open water if I can, not in a pool with lanes, but actually there's a quarry out here that's really cool to swim in. There's a conservation area that has a lake that's really great for swimming too. But in the winter, you got to go inside and use the pool, right? And then the bike, believe it or not, most of my biking I do indoors. Because it is dangerous being on a bike, even on a country road. It's just, I don't know, there's stuff out there, animals, potholes, cars, whatever, or you can just, I don't know, stuff happens. So, or mountain bike. I'll do mountain bike going to trails, but that could be dangerous too. In fact, I almost took out my shoulder. I did dislocate my shoulder 2 months ago, but it wasn't like the full dislocation. It was just the joint, the top joint. It popped out and back in. So I was actually okay about 4 weeks later. I got lucky there. But the cycling, most of it I do in my basement on a simulated trainer. That's what most triathloners do. It's just safer. And then the running, you can do almost anywhere, right? That's pretty flexible on the running. But I don't do that in my basement. I do that outdoors.
It'd be kind of weird doing it down in the basement, I bet.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could do a treadmill, but I cannot do treadmill running. I've tried it. I can't do it.
For that long. Yeah. But, to your point, talking about the transition pieces, and one of the things when I was doing my half marathon, I was the last leg, of course, but there were people who were out there. You could either do it solo or on a team.
Yes.
That I was watching. It was a 40-mile bike ride was the first part of it. And then they would come down and then like immediately run to it was the New River here where we at. And that's where they were kayaking. And like the transition of it, I was, some of them were just immediately, I guess they had their bike cleats on and everything, just jumping in the kayak and going. And I was like, man, don't they need a, break, change shoes? I mean, get some, but they were animals, man. And I was like just applauding them. I was like, I couldn't believe it, and I was sitting there wondering, man, what would it be like if I was doing that right now? What would be going through my head?
Yeah, they've got it down. That transition, they got it down to split seconds on, everything, but it's an art.
It is. Yeah. And even when they got off the kayak and when I was waiting for my relay to come tag me in, that I saw him getting out of the kayak, and one guy, he just took off running. And I was like, did he even change his?
I know. I see. That's when I started triathloning. I have a funny story about that because I was very bad at transitioning. I had to think about everything. Okay, hold on. I came into the bike, take my helmet off, get my goggles, find my legs. I'm too much thinking, right? And so my first transition on my very first triathlon, I think I was like 6 minutes in the T1, going from the swim where you have to get your wetsuit off and to the bike where you got to put all your bike stuff on, get your bike. And, so I was 6 minutes, and most people are like a minute and a half. Sure. So my buddy Chris, who got me into this whole thing, triathloning thing, he said to me after the race, "Good race, Mark, but what happened to you in T1? Were you making breakfast or something? Or, like, you were 6 minutes in there."
What is your mindset like when you're going through these legs? And because for me, we were kind of out in the wilderness a little bit, so I had headphones in, but they were kind of spotty. They were going in and out, and I was trying to I even did a couple runs without headphones just because of that whole fact right there. It's like, man, what if, I don't have music at a certain point in this race? What am I going to be like? But a lot of it was just me, trying to relax my mind and just, think about, think about the breathing, think about my pacing, and not, worry about if somebody was passing me or not. And
that's right.
Think about, is that just kind of keep your mind at ease is best and not try to think about like, some things would come up as far as, maybe little stressors in my life and maybe like, ways like, oh yeah, maybe I should do it this way next time or whatever. But, it's just anything I could keep my mind active from, I guess, instead of thinking on.
Yeah, but not too hyper, like you said. Try to relax.
There you go.
For example, in the swim, when you start out in that swim in a triathlon, you got people all around you, they're kicking you in the face, they're coming up behind you, bouncing off your side, and you got to go around a buoy together, like maybe do a 90-degree turn, and it all gets congested at the buoy, and people are almost going backwards trying to get around. They're go underwater. That's a good strategy, right? You know, actually, I never thought of that. Maybe I should try that next time. Go underwater on the buoy, because there's a lot of stress, especially in the swim, because it's pretty congested.
Sure.
And people almost start hyperventilating under that water, even if they've been doing a lot of swimming. It's nerve-wracking, especially in your first triathlon. And then when you're on the bike, like you said, relax. You don't want to redline too much. Like you can get excited on the bike too, and then you start pushing too hard, forgetting that you've got 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers to run at the end of it. So I've done a triathlon where I went way too hard on the bike, got way too excited, pumping it up the hills, redlining it. Like by redlining, I mean just pushing your quads to their burning. Like you really don't want to do that, or getting your heart rate up to 90% max. There's no point doing that. So you want to really control yourself on the bike. Don't go berserk. Then, yeah, like you said, don't worry if anybody's passing you, and just be a little cautious and save some energy for that run, which is going to be really tough.
Yeah, that was my thing, was that I didn't know when exactly I was going to be able to start my run, just because you're waiting around, and I was like, that was part of me, like, how much am I eating, how much am I drinking, am I warmed up enough, should I do a little bit more? But once I got going, and I was kind of in a small group, but then we kind of all spread ourselves out, and I was like, all right, and I was wanting to run with my app that I was using, because it told me what my pace was. And so I was like, all right, just stick with your pace. Don't get too crazy out here. And, if somebody does pass you, don't let your competitive instincts, and even if they're going, maybe you'll catch them somewhere down the road, but I was like, you got to stick to stay in your lane. That was my thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. People don't know that on the bike, you cannot you can't bike in groups. So you have to decide, am I going to follow this person or pass them? You can't tuck in behind them. You have to either pull back 2 bike lengths or go right around them. So in the running, though, you can go in packs. And sometimes that's nice if you can get in a small group, like you mentioned. Yeah.
Well, taking it back a little bit, though, I mean, getting back to your book, that you said, I think you were 45 when your daughter, when she was 7, when you started running. I mean, did you have any athletic background before this, or was it just?
Yes, I had run high school cross country, and I did do one marathon when I was 20. Then I got injured and I gave up. I ran a pretty fast marathon. I ran a 2:36 marathon when I was 20. I didn't even train that much, so I obviously had some innate ability. But then I got sore knees, and just sort of, I was a university student. I just said I couldn't handle it. I mean, even back then, the orthotics, like, I'm pretty old now. I'm talking about 1980. The orthotics were just coming on the scene, so I didn't even know much about orthotics. So we were, I just packed it in, and then, like I say, I didn't really do anything for 25 more years. And then my daughter and I started getting into it, and we can talk about her too, because she's progressed. She's got some good stories. She had some major challenges, and it all comes in the book. And but I'm very proud of her, and she's just this year made some remarkable breakthroughs in her running. She's now 25.
Well, what were some of her bigger challenges that you think?
One of the biggest one was in grade 9. She finished. She was second in the midget girls Ontario provincial finals for the 3,000 meters. So she was almost a gold medal. She missed by half a second. Anyway, it was a great race. So she was highly touted, and she was doing very well. She got an invitation to the New York indoor New Balance indoors race.
Nice.
And she anyway. So when cross country season started in grade 9 in the fall, she thought she was expected to be one of the top finishes in Ontario, in the province. And my wife and I went to the race, and everything seemed okay. And she took off. She was in the top 20 right at the start. They have about 300 or 400 in this race, all the best in their province. So she was had a pretty good start, top 20. And then they sort of disappeared into the forest. But they had somebody on the microphone who was announcing the race. And the top 10 are, and they give the names and all that. We never heard her name. And then after a kilometer, we still never heard her name. And I was starting to get worried, because she should have been in the top 3. And then 10 minutes later, it's only a 3K race, so 2 mile race.
Sure.
They start coming across the finish line. I don't see her. I haven't heard her name. And then we waited for every single girl to come across the finish line. We never saw her. So we started getting quite worried. And now about 10 minutes later, she ended up walking. She was walking, you could see her walking towards her school tent.
Yeah.
And we discovered that she had an asthma attack.
Oh no.
So it was the first time we knew then that she had exercise-induced asthma, which is a condition that some of your listeners might be able to relate to. And she only made it apparently like 800 meters into the race and then just couldn't breathe anymore. And a coach out there just sort of looked after her and made sure she got back in. But that's what happened. And that was a challenge for her for the next 2 or 3 years. She had to deal, even taking the puffer, the puffer that some people take before. Yeah, even that didn't completely protect her. And then she took the drug Singular, which is a pill you can take once a day, gives you added protection. Even that, and with the puffer, it didn't necessarily. She had some good races, no doubt about that. Like she got another invite to one of the New Balance indoors and ran a really, really fast 5K, like 17:25.
Wow.
That's when she's 14 years old, right? So it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I was surprised she made it through the race because it was really humid in there. And that's the type of condition where you're probably going to blow up with your asthma again, right? But she got through and ran really fast. But so that was frustrating, but she's outgrown that now. Like it's funny, right around second year university, it just sort of disappeared.
Just on its own, it just kind of went away.
Yeah. And that does happen. That happens with stuff like that. Yeah. So
did she change her diet up or anything like that? Or
no, it's sort of weird. But then she had other challenges, like a lot of females, especially females, will get really fast when they're 14 or 15. And then when they hit puberty, their body changes, their hormones change, and they actually slow down. And that happened to her. So she slowed down. She did her fastest running when she was 15 and then slowed down, sort of regressed, even though she was training as much or more. Even through university cross country and track and field, she never hit her times till just this last year and a half. And then she started taking down her records. It was very frustrating because you're talking from 16 to 23, 7 years, training hard, never really injured, and not even able to run your high school times, your grade 9, grade 10 times. So I give her credit. She stuck to it. She never stopped. She's always enjoyed the running, even though it was a bit of a hit to her ego. And just this year, she started taking down her time. She took down pretty big. Like she did a 1,500 meter this summer in 4:31. I think that took. She had her PB before that was 4:38 in grade 10. So 4:31. That's getting pretty fast. And then she ran a 17 flat 5K. And then she's probably going to be 16 next year, 16:30 or something, 5K. I think she's progressing quite a lot now again.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah.
She's just getting better with age.
Yeah, and that happens with a lot of runners. One of the most famous American runners, Desiree Linden, formerly Desiree DeVille, she won the Boston Marathon just a few years ago.
Hey, okay, that's why I was like, I knew that name somewhere.
She said the same thing. I remember reading a little bit about her. She said that she ran her fastest when she was 13, 14, and that she never approached those times again until she was in her mid-20s. And then I don't know how old she was when she won Boston. She's in her 30s at least. So she had to be very patient. She stuck with it. She's got a great heart, and she finally won the Boston Marathon and as an American woman. And she's so motivating, her story. Yeah.
Do you think that, trying to think of the best way to put this, that, age when it comes to athletics, that it's almost just a number anymore, and it's just kind of based on that, how you're recovering, what you're putting in your body, what's your stress level like, what's your nutrient deficiencies like, and how many hours of sleep you're getting. And I guess what I'm getting at is that, when you're watching, even if you're watching like here, baseball, football or something, and there's a guy that comes out, he's 33, 34 years old, and the commentator's like, oh, it's a Cinderella story, 34 years old, so out here playing whatever it is, and I know running's completely different than American football or whatever, but and for CrossFit, I'm 36 and they put me in a different age bracket now when I do, certain competitions. And so, but, some people seem to argue that those few things I just listed off that, if you're watching what you're doing, 36 is the new 28, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look at marathoning. Eliud Kipchoge just set the world record. He's 37 years old. And Carlos Lopes won I think it was the 1980 Olympic marathon, 37 years old. And your American Kira D'Amato just set the U.S. women's marathon record this year. She was 37 years old. So I would say for marathoning, for distance running, age is just a number until about 40, but inevitably there will be a decline in the aerobic capacity. So at that point, age grouping makes sense. And then age is just a number again, because you're in a group and you can compete in your age group. It's great.
Is that, you just qualified for, I forgot what you told me. It was something in Spain though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. In the 60, 64 bracket?
Yeah, so it's funny in my book, Friend, Daughter, and Father, I talk about how I want to qualify for the World Championships, because 3 years ago I actually did qualify, but I never actually finished the swim. So I made it to Geneva, Switzerland for Canada. I was representing Canada in my age group, 60 to 65, and it was a windy, wavy swim, and it wasn't even out and back. It was like into the wind almost all the way. And that day they did not allow wetsuits, and I'm a fairly weak swimmer. That's my weak spot.
I heard that.
I depend on the wetsuit. Like without it, I knew I was going to be in trouble. And so I made it about 800. I had to go 1,500 meters. I made it about 800 meters, and I surrendered to the rescue boat. And I wasn't the only one who didn't make it. It was a pretty tough swim, but it was disappointing because I never got on my bike, and they had a great bike course there in Geneva, and also I never got to run, which is my strength. And so I just said to my friend Chris, who did finish his race, I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna make it back here someday." And so COVID hit, couldn't do it for a couple of years. But then this year, I trained hard and I managed to qualify again for that same championship. Good. It's going to be in Spain in 12 months, in September of 2023. So I'm really thrilled. I'm, like I say, without joining my daughter when she was 7 years old, none of this would be happening, right? It's all like, it's funny how it all, connects. But I'm going to Spain, and I'm gonna finish that swim. And actually, ironically, they just made a new rule saying that if you're 59 years old or older, they cannot tell you can't wear a wetsuit.
Good.
Because I thought that made no sense anyway. Like they're doing it to protect people from overheating. I'm not going to overheat in a wetsuit, even if Lake Geneva is 23 degrees instead of 22. And when they plucked us all from the water, like there were a lot of us, we were all shivering. So it made no sense, that rule. And I'm glad the ITU has changed that rule. Physiologically, nobody's going to overheat in a 1,500 meter swim. They can, though, if it's a longer swim, like say 4 miles in really warm water. Yeah, that can be an issue, but not in this thing.
Do you set goals for yourself to keep, competing for as long as you can until you're physically able to, and just that's your goals?
Yeah.
Hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z until, when the wheels fall off is when I'll stop.
Yeah. So I'm going to be 64 very soon. So I'm in the 60 to 64 year old age group. So I'm actually at a disadvantage. I didn't think I'd qualify, Chris. I thought I would be, because I'm competing against guys 2, 3, 4 years younger than me. And I know it sounds like, okay, about 61, 64, who cares? No, it's actually, you can feel the difference.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. So I didn't think I'd make it. So now I'm in, but I was sort of trying this year to get ready for next year, because next year I get to be qualifying to try to get into the 65, 69 group. That'll be much easier for me. So I guess I'll use this as a stepping stone. I don't know where it is after Spain. I don't think they've announced it for next year, but I'd like to go to that too, wherever it is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What keeps you motivated at your age? I mean, is it just that, I've always said on here that I have plans to be a centurion. I think I want to live to 100. So being able to physically move and being independent and knowing that I could, someone, hey, Mark said, hey, let's go run a triathlon or a marathon, half marathon. They're like, yeah, let's go do it. Just stuff like that, like is really, it's like a dopamine rush, I guess, for me. It's just like I can get out there and still do it. It doesn't matter how old I am, where I'm at, just that. And that's why, I still like CrossFit, just because, they put you in different age groups and depending on what day it is, like I did a competition last weekend in Bristol and there was people they're all different ages competing in the same level as me. I'm still able to like, hey, I still got it. Even those younger people, with me, I'm still out there, doing pretty well for myself. So I think that's what kind of motivates me. But is that kind of what?
Yeah, I think so. And also my failure in that race 3 years ago, that was a big motivation. Sure. So failure can be a great motivation, especially when you think you have a chance of succeeding beyond that. So, so I don't know what, my daughter's been a great motivation because seeing her run and seeing what she's gone through and how she's bounced back and all her success, especially this last year after her performance decline. That's been very motivating to see. And I've got this friend I mentioned, Chris, who motivates me. He was a great mentor. He's the one who got me into triathlon. I was sort of a pure runner, and then I think I had a bit of a nagging injury. He said, hey, Mark, why don't you join me on a bike ride? I said, okay. So I grabbed the bike, and I was just drafting him all the way, just trying to keep up with, stuck right behind his draft, but because he's quite a cyclist. But he got me into biking, and biking was great because it felt like I was floating compared to running. It was like, hey, this is interesting. I'm floating. There's no pounding. I can do 2 hours. I'm not stiff. There's no eccentric muscle contraction at all, right? Yeah. So compared to running, and so I sort of liked it. And then the swimming, you actually literally are floating. So I started doing that, and it was a nice complement to running. The floating, the swimming, and the bike, really nice compliment. A bit of a break for the running. I don't even run every day now. I run maybe 4 or 5 max times a week. Okay. Right? Yeah. So that kept me motivated too. It helped transition to triathlon because it gave me a fresh thing to do, new sports to try to master. Swimming is very technical, so you can take lessons and really learn a lot, and you can really improve a lot after even 2 years in. You can still get better because of technique. And then biking, it's really cool getting a bike and trying to figure out how to do that properly. So the biking's been fantastic. I had a guy here at this place called the Flying Monkey, and then a guy named Dave, and he just did a wonderful job of fitting me to my bike and showing me the proper equipment and building my bike from scratch and making it suit me. And then I learned to try to, get fit on that bike. So that was all a different world compared to running. And so that's been great. A real learning experience transitioning into triathlons.
Well, I feel like that'd be another motivational factor, just what you said, that, I'm a firm believer of what you're putting into something is what you're going to get out of it. And that, like you just said, like with the technique and learning new things and like, hey, getting faster at, my 10-mile bike ride, my 5K, whatever it is, that's just like, okay, this is really working. It's just not, just fake news or whatever you want to say. If there's actually something behind this, right? And that's what, when I'm seeing improvement in myself and just my daily life and my mental and physical health, it's like, wow, I'm okay. Now I'm starting to get addicted. Well, I don't want to say addicted, but you get addicted to those results, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah. And my daughter is very motivated. I once asked her, how do you feel if she's a pure runner right now, although she's starting to cycle a bit too. So you never know. I could see her getting into triathlons. But I asked her, what do you feel like when you don't go for a run? She said, I'm a bitch. That was her answer. That was her answer. Like, okay. Sorry for the language, but
no, it's fine. I don't mind it on here.
And there's even been studies on aerobic exercise and whatnot, and trying to connect it to mental health, right? And I talk about that in my book too. And they found it really hard to. There's a lot of correlation. Runners or athletes have more, less depression,
sure,
better, stuff like that. But there was all correlation. They can never really prove it. So, but a recent study, I think it's the Harvard University, did a very sophisticated analysis of athletes, endurance athletes. I think it was cyclists, runners, and whatnot. And they did find they used a very randomized technique of statistics, and they found a pretty strong correlation. But I think the way to find it is, if you do the study, here's how you do the study. You take aerobic athletes, and you say to them, you can't exercise. Just tell them that, and see how they feel the next week or two, and you'll find like they're going to be bitches, a lot of them, right? And that's the way to do the study. Of course, nobody wants to do that study, because who would want to partake in that, right? So they don't. That would be the way to prove that exercise is good for your mental health, because when you take it away from people, they become climbing the walls, right?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I heard a quote one time that great athletes are governed by routine. And it made so much sense to me, just because, I have my full-time job. Then immediately after my job, I go train for CrossFit. But, even when I started training for my half marathon, I was like, all right, on my lunch break or right before work, whenever I could fit it in, that was what I was doing. And if I wasn't able to get it in, I was like, oh, all right. And I wouldn't say I was a bitch, but, you could feel there was just something like, I feel like I need to exert that energy out of me, throughout my life. Yeah. And just that, and it does kind of and I was just thinking about it constantly. Like, okay, when now, if I can't run now, when can I get it in? It's like, okay, well, today will be my rest day. Then I'll run tomorrow and still be able to get it in. And I would just make, and then that could be self-discipline. That could be just, the motivational factor, but it was also just something in my head too, that I had to get it out no matter what,
Yeah. So that becomes, an issue too, though, and in Run Daughter Run Father, the book, I have a chapter on overtraining, because that can sort of creep in, the idea of overstressing, overtraining to the point where there's some syndromes that are connected to this. Like there's one known as the female athlete triad. There's the a syndrome called REDS. It's an acronym, but it's basically about energy deficiency syndrome, where you're begging your body for so much energy that it's going to become deficient. And there's even hypogonadal syndrome on males, where their hormones and their gonads start becoming affected by just going too hard and not recognize it. So that's overtraining, and that's sort of it's a physiological thing, but it can sort of show itself through lackluster training or decreased performance. Just there's so many ways it can show itself, but the basic idea is you need to take a bit of time off, or shut it down it could be even a few weeks or few days or whatever, but you need to just back off a bit. But then, it can relate to other things like iron deficiency, like your diet. Like my daughter had a test once where she came in at 5. I can't remember the units there, micrograms per milliliter or whatever of iron iron in the blood. But she 5 is very low level. They're supposed to be 20 or more, and they say endurance athletes are supposed to be 40 or 50 or 60. Oh, wow. So she was very low, and this was before the Canadian cross country championships, but she hadn't been showing any problems in her workouts. So we were wondering, should she do an iron infusion and stuff like that? And then we had her retested, and she came in at 45 on the retest. So who knows? Like, we thought, okay, maybe the first test was wrong. Let's trust the second test. But things like iron and diet can creep in too. So you do have to be careful in all of this overtraining with these highly motivated people who don't want to miss any workouts and want to keep up with their teammates and want to get better and better. And they're really highly, highly motivated people. Sometimes they go overboard. It can be a distress. It's, you want to stress your body, right? But you don't want to distress yourself at that point, right? So
in talking about a little bit about overtraining and recovery there, and about diet, people were asking me that, before I run, am I going to carb load or whatever? And and I've never been one of those people who do very well. Like, I've done a lot of different diets. I can't remember if we talked about this or not last time, but I like to experiment with them and to see how my body's feeling, what my performance is like, and that. And I told him, I was like, no, I don't think so. That I know, I've been running X amount of miles. I know how I feel. So I'm not going to, put something in myself where it's just going to be, all right, it's what's going to happen here. It's going to be, is it a time bomb? Or are we going to be okay?
Yeah.
I just ate exactly the same way. And I had, And even that morning, I think I had a big breakfast because I knew I wasn't going to be running until late afternoon. But and then I was just kind of, had small, I guess, snacks I knew that would work well with me. And then it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came
That's
out.
reasonable. That's reasonable, especially for a half marathon. You don't really need to carbo load. Now, for a marathon, some people will start experimenting that, but you don't want to experiment like for your one marathon. You want to try it before that, well before that, but for a half marathon. But I can tell you, still, diet can affect a half marathon. I did something really stupid. I should tell your listeners about.
Uh-oh.
Well, I'm always fascinated with body weight, and for me, I tend to. Sort of in the winter, my weight goes up, and then I try to drive it down to like where I'm lean and mean running machine.
There you go.
Racing season, right? And that makes sense, right? So, sure. Because assuming you're healthy, if you can decrease your body weight 1%, you're actually going to become about 1% faster. Like, assuming you're not too skinny, you're not, So there's a point where that doesn't work, but I know I'm a little bit overweight. You can see a little bit of flab there. So, trying to lose a couple of pounds. Anyway, before this half marathon, this was a few years ago, I thought I would drive down my weight a couple pounds the week before the race. So how do you do that? You don't eat carbohydrates, right? Sure. So, I was like really careful not doing my normal diet. And so I actually got to the starting line a couple pounds lighter and thinking, I'm going to be 2% faster now, right? And I was 2% faster for about 10 kilometers.
Oh no.
And the next 11 kilometers, the second half of the half marathon, I was like slowing down. Like I didn't feel that good. People were passing me. And normally in a race, I'm not like, not that bad. I used to be all that, but I just didn't have anything in the tank, it seemed. And I couldn't even figure out why, right? And then it was only a few days after the race, I realized how stupid I was with that diet. I think I actually hit the wall or nearly hit the wall. I was low in glycogen stores in my muscles for the second half of that race. That can actually happen even in a shorter distance if you're quite depleted anyway, which I was.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow right there. Just
yeah. So
tough lesson to learn. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. It was so stupid, man. I'm a little slow sometimes. It took me a while to figure out what happened. I'm now convinced that's exactly what happened.
I don't doubt it. Sounds like it, man. Yeah. It's just that, you do something like that, you really understand what it's going to do to your body or how it's going to change, especially if you haven't been experiencing with it. You don't know. And that's one thing that scared me. And I think I've had a similar lesson like that, but it was, earlier in the years that I just don't want to start changing a lot of different things. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it almost. It's one of those
Exactly.
things. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm not saying what I do should be done by everybody, but it's just, I know what works well for me. And I never believe there's one diet that fits all, but everyone's different, right? Everyone's got
everybody is. And one other thing I'd like to mention that comes up in the book about my daughter and I is I was sort of coaching her when she was 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, 13. By that point, she became a high school athlete and she had some pretty good coaches, so I didn't have to be as involved. But for that first 6 years, I sort of had to watch her, and she was very motivated. She always wanted to run more, try 5K races, try 10K. Like she really had a lot of zeal and energy, and I was constantly reining her in, like telling her, subduing her, telling her, no, you don't need to do this race. You don't need another workout. Watching her kilometers, miles. So we were pretty conservative with her. And in the foreword to my book, she writes a foreword to my book, and she talks about how we locked horns a lot over this issue. And she was very hard-nosed about trying to run harder, run more, run faster, run races. And I was always holding her back. But she said she now appreciates it because she, first of all, has never been injured seriously. Good. And she still loves running. So that's a big issue for parents. They've got to be careful. There's a parent trap.
I wanted to ask you about was like, the type of bonding experience that came through with this whole book and, y'all, like you said, you coaching with her and running with her and all that. I mean, what was it like? What was that process?
Yeah. So here I am, I'm her father, I'm her coach, and I'm somewhat of her training partner for several years. That's three things in one. So it can be some people should say you should never even coach your own son.
I've heard that.
But you just have to be careful. There's that parent trap I talked about where you just want to live by their success, so you push them more and more and more. But that jeopardizes their health and their long-term athletic development. So I was careful about that. And the other thing is I recognize that sometimes I had to wear one hat more than the other. Like, for example, that race, we went to Philadelphia for a race where she had an asthma attack. We went to the Big Penn relays. She had an asthma attack in that race too. And it was so disappointing because we drove all the way to Philadelphia. She was so pumped up, ran with the best American girls. Hannah DeBelsey, the best American, was in that race.
Wow.
Stephanie was running pretty well. And then after 4 laps, she came by me in the stands and was pointing at her throat. I thought, oh no, she can't breathe, right? So she just shut it down and jogged in. And it was a long ride back. Now, on the way back, to Canada, I could have been the coach and analyzing everything, but I was her father, and I just told silly jokes. We played games, word games. We listened to the songs, tried anything but talk about the race. Just forget about the race. She just needs, someone to hug her and love her, and that's when I couldn't be her coach anymore. I just had to be a good father. So there was a lot of bonding like that in the failures,
Yeah. Is that kind of, I can't remember if I told you, but, I'm not a father yet, but is it just one of those things when you just kind of know, or is it just naturally come and like, all right, like you just said, this is time to be a father. This is not time to be the coach right here and break it down and analyze every little thing. I mean, did that just come natural to you? Or is that just another just kind of lesson that you had to learn? It's like, hey, like through trial and error when she was young.
Through trial and error, and then reading about other people, like reading about other fathers, and like Sebastian Coe is a good example. His father coached him, Peter Coe, and Peter Coe wrote the book Winning Running. It's a great book, and he was quite involved in his son's training, and he coached him right through. And Peter learned about all the running science, and so I did read what I could, but sometimes I made mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes I made was after she had a terrible race 1 year, sort of when she regressed. So I think second year university, she just had an awful race in the university final race. Like I was just shocked. She looked like she was running slowly, and she was not even a 4-minute kilometer pace. Normally she's like 3:40 or something.
Sure.
3:45. She couldn't even do a 4-minute kilometer pace, and she looked slow. And then after the race, I went up to her and said, are you a little heavy or something, or what happened there? Like, I'm like, no, why did I say that? Like, that is, first of all, why would you say that right after the race? Like, they're not going to be in a good mood, right?
Correct.
Just give them a hug. Don't worry about it. Don't try to is your blood iron low, or is your body weight too high? like that was just one of the. That was a low point actually in our relationship. Actually, that moment when I said that after that horrible race, I really, and I talk about that in my book, how I failed her, and it was just not a good thing to say as a coach or as a father. It's just
Yeah.
So
it's like you said, trial and error. I mean, and now that and I hate saying that because sometimes you have to go through those experiences in order to learn and learn from your mistakes and make yourself better, which, it sucks, going through something like that or hurting somebody like that. But, it seems like y'all created a good bond now, and, she's still running, and things seem pretty well.
It's pretty good. And even this writing of this book was not a total issue, but it was a bit of an issue. Like she got wind that I was writing a book about her and I, right? So like I never thought I'd ever write anything biographical. I'm not a famous person, right? But I felt like I had a story to share, like a story that people can learn about, and to share that knowledge and those experiences, the funny stories and the ups and downs, and definitely some training. We have lots of training tips and advice and workout ideas in there too. So I wanted to share that, and I'm very proud of what we did, and what she did for me. Here's a son or daughter positively influence a parent, right? We always think as parents we got to influence them, but it can come the other way too, right? It's just fantastic. So I wanted to share that. I did bounce the idea of the book off her, and she was Originally, she's like sort of looked at me sideways, but then she came aboard and she was actually very helpful with providing statistics and recollections. When was this race stuff? Well, do you remember how you felt and stuff like that? And then she was very, very helpful at editing it and reading it, and then so giving me feedback on it. And then she wrote the foreword to it, and then she even we put some photographs in there, like not too many, but a few sprinkled across the book. And so she helped with that too. So she was that was another shared venture, the book. It was another great way of sort of capping it all off,
Well, Dr. Mark, I think it's a perfect way to take this home on that right there. So if has the book out yet, if people want to find it, or?
Yeah, so it just came out a couple of weeks ago. If they type in "run daughter, run father," they'll see it. Maybe you can have a link to the podcast.
I'll put it on the show notes.
Type it in on Amazon or Apple or Kobo or Indigo. It's on most of the major retail platforms. And there's an ebook, and there's also a paperback on those platforms. So it's called "Run Daughter, Run Father."
All right. Well, that sounds great. I'm Dr. Mark, I'm glad you came back here. I'm glad you had another chat with me. This was fun. Glad we did.
It was an absolute pleasure, Chris. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks again. All right, folks, we're out of here.